We now move on to a bit more of a provocative part, the debate, ladies and gentlemen. Do you remember the debate last year? Do you remember Craig Memory? An incredible speech at the debate last year. It was very sad because it led to everyone's feedback being he was definitely the best Craig here last year. So sad. Second again. Do we truly understand the implications of the transition, especially when it comes to consumers, and who should be in the driving seat? The forum debate today is, given the speed and importance of the energy transition, energy market governance should be left only in the hands of government. Energy market governance should be only left in the hands of government. Feel free to use this for your year 3 and 4 debates as well, if you really want. I'm sure we used to be what's better, cats or dogs, but I'm sure they're doing this now when they're in school. Okay, so please welcome to the stage for the affirmative, we have Adam Berry, Deputy Director and Professor at UTS Human Technology Institute. Come on up, guys. Elizabeth Molyneux, the Deputy Secretary for Energy at the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, Victoria. And arguing for the negative, we have Ruchika Diora, the General Manager of Consumer Energy Solutions at SEC, and Erin Turner, the Chief Executive Officer of Consumer Policy Research Centre. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Craig, and dogs are better. So, ladies and gentlemen, how good is Milo? So, many of my childhood memories are of sneaking in, grabbing a can, grabbing a tablespoon, eating it straight from the can. Am I alone? Do other people do this? Okay, great. So, Milo, in my opinion, is pretty good. But seriously, how good is Milo? So, happily, an industry co-developed standard, the Australian Health Star rating system, can actually give us a definitive answer. And isn't that all we've ever wanted, right? Some hard science around the quality of Milo. So, yes, it's wonderful, filled with childhood memories, also filled with 43% sugar. Maybe that is why I liked it a bit as a kid. So, industry co-developed standard. What did we come out with in terms of a star rating for Milo? 4.5 stars. So, that's right. Yes, it should have been 5, but 4.5 will do. So how do we get here? So how do we get this industry co-developed standard giving us 4.5? Well, it turns out that through some backroom argumentation that the star rating wouldn't be based on what was in the can. It would be based on how you use what's in the can. And wouldn't you know it, the primary way we use Milo, definitely the way everyone uses it, 3 teaspoons in 200 mils of skim milk. The classic way to have Milo. So it turns out that 4.5 star rating, that skim milk is doing rather a lot of heavy lifting. What we're actually saying is skim milk's really good for you. You make it slightly worse if you drizzle a little bit of Milo on top. Okay, so the people spoke, the good people at Nestle listened and said, okay, we hear you. Milo on its own, if you were just to eat it out of the can, is 1.5 stars per the algorithm here. So we're going to withdraw it. It's causing confusion in the market. So that was 8 years ago. 8 years later, of course, they've spent a lot of that Nestle science money to build the best possible product, make it healthier for kids, and tell us exactly how healthy it is now. So can anyone tell me what the star rating is now for Milo? It has no rating. And the reason for that is that the industry co-developed standard is voluntary. I wonder why it was voluntary. So Nestle decided perhaps better not to tell people whether or not we really are 4.5 stars. We'll just remove that. So when you're thinking about whether or not government alone should lead regulation, this is exactly the sort of thing you should be thinking about. Who really knows what good is? You might say, okay, great story about Milo, Adam, not really particularly relevant to government regulation in the energy sector. And I'll say, stick with me. Craig will eventually ring a bell. Hopefully before the bell rings, I'll get to it. But let's think, what if government is in the lead? What can happen? Another thing from my childhood, remember watching 60 Minutes as a little kid, ozone layer, the hole opening up, if I step outside I'm going to catch on fire, was a real problem, right? At the time, DuPont, largest CFC manufacturer in the world, said, we don't see any imminent reason to have unilateral regulation in the sector. Suspiciously, that was a day before the Montreal climate talks, which led to the CFC mandate, globally picked up by governments around the world. Australia, the same year that the Montreal Protocol came into effect, legislated, law came into place, and wouldn't you know it, 99% of CFCs vanished. Government knew what good was, and they made the change. Little kicker on this, by the way, DuPont ended up making a $2.3 billion business out of selling new refrigerants that they'd patented before the Montreal Protocol came into effect. Who would have thought? Now, let's get to energy, and I will wrap up on this, and I'll wrap up very quickly. You might say, government might know what good is, but can they act on good fast? And let me just point out a couple of things where that has been the case. So, no matter what you think about the gas price cap, it took us 3 weeks from announcement to actually implementing new law in that space. And that made a profound difference in how much all of us pay for gas, or at least those that are still on gas. MEPS and GEMS, right? MEPS, for years, industry said providing information would destroy our industry. That was Alan Pierce said that, or at least quoted that. When it came in, MEPS led to a $119 benefit per tonne of CO2 emissions saved. This is government knowing what good is. And when we think about data centres coming, and they are coming, when you think about OpenAI and Anthropic and Microsoft and Amazon, ask yourself, do they really know what good is?
There you go, first speech from Adam, and didn't even get to the end of the time. Now that may also have been a contributing factor, is that despite being the chairman and having only 2 things I have to be able to do to be the chairman, I did forget to start the clock straight after. But by the way, for those who are wondering what is the second thing you should know as a chairman of a debate, there's only really 2 things you have to know. The second thing you should know is the order of the speakers. Now just talk amongst yourselves. Guys, I don't know who's coming. You're coming. Okay, yeah. All right, so to start for the negative on energy market governance should only be left only in the hands of the government. Ruchika Diora, the General Manager of Consumer Energy Solutions at the SEC. Welcome, Ruchika.
It's a hard act to follow. Thank you, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this interesting debate. So my stance today, I rise to oppose the motion that given the speed and importance of the energy transition, energy market governance should be left only in the hands of government. Only, just government, nothing but government. Because we all know that the one thing that thrives on centralized, uniform, committee-driven decision-making, it's rapid technology disruption. When considering this question and contemplating how we as an industry need to respond to energy reform, I went back to why the energy market exists at all. Brendan mentioned earlier today, we're taking too much a priori assumption in how we think about reform. So sure, traditionally markets are there to coordinate economic activity, allocate scarce resources, and encourage competition and innovation. But at its core, the energy market exists to manage risk on behalf of customers. Energy is volatile. Demand surges, generators trip, wind drops, heat waves spike consumption, fuel prices swing wildly, Trump deposes another foreign dictator. The average household does not wake up wanting to hedge exposure to wholesale market prices before their morning cup of coffee, so we rely on markets to do it collectively. We rely on markets to pool the uncertainty, the price risk, and to allocate capital so we can spread the shock across participants instead of concentrating it in one place. When they function well, consumers benefit from lower costs, greater innovation, and more reliability without having to understand what FCAS is before 7 a.m. Now, the motion suggests that the speed and importance of the energy transition governance should be left, again, only in the hands of governance, as if complexity becomes simpler when it's centralized. But energy markets are really fascinating. They do not naturally emerge as efficient in electricity. They must be constructed and maintained, as we did here in the late 90s and early 2000s. And remember, electricity markets are engineered markets. They're not spontaneous ones. So efficiency within a regulated market requires careful design, clear price signals, protection against market power, while balancing innovation, risk mitigation, and economic and social needs of all. And those economic and social needs will evolve. And they have evolved more quickly than we possibly could have conceived of 26 years ago. The energy market is not meant to be static design. Decarbonization, decentralization, and fundamentally the democratization of information and technology has led to rapid change and disruption. And we need to take our cues from consumers and innovators and private entities to evolve our system into one that has the flexibility to efficiently manage different forms of risk, unforeseen technology risk, which is hard. And don't misunderstand me, governance institutions like AMO, AER, and AEMC are essential. They safeguard our system security, they protect consumers, they design the rule books. But the idea that governance should be left to only to government assumes something extraordinary. It assumes that governments are always faster than markets. It assumes that bureaucracies can innovate more quickly than entrepreneurs. It assumes that ministers are better at forecasting technology curves than engineers and investors who are risking their own capital. That's a pretty bold assumption. We see very meaningful progress in the transition through policies such as legislated renewable targets, but also because households are installing rooftop solar at record rates, and because companies are building batteries the size of small suburbs, and investors are pouring billions into wind and solar. And if we add a new partner to our already full dance card, data centers, we have heard, and we feel very deeply if you work in network connections, artificial intelligence, cloud computing, and hyperscale digital infrastructure are driving significant new energy demand. That introduces new forms of risk. They're using enough electricity to actually power small cities. Their load profiles are different. They're often constant and highly concentrated. All of this can lead to significant impact on consumer access and agency and pricing, not to mention the inevitable demands on our natural resources. If mismanaged, rapid data center growth could crowd out consumer benefits. But again, the answer is not exclusive central control. It's coordinated governance across all stakeholders. It's markets that can send locational pricing to encourage data centers to build where capacity exists. It's contracts that can require firming and storage commitments. Connection standards that can allocate upgrade costs appropriately, and time of use and demand response frameworks that integrate flexible industrial loads and consumer loads into system balancing. Markets, for all of their flaws, are extraordinary discovery machines, and they test ideas and they punish bad ones, they scale good ones, and they mobilize capital faster than any budget process ever could. If we place governance exclusively in the hands of government, we risk slowing capital deployment and dulling innovation and concentrating risk. The energy sector is way too important to be left to one actor alone. It requires all of them, in tension, in dialogue, occasionally in disagreement, but moving in the same direction as a coalition of the knowledgeable. If we truly want a fast, resilient, affordable, and innovative transition, we don't need a single conductor waving a baton. We need a well-rehearsed orchestra. And orchestras, as we know, sound far better when there's more than one instrument that's allowed to play. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chuka. Now, can I just point out, I would like to be able to use my bell at some point. So just, you can go a little bit longer if you want. Just use some extra time. Erin's looking like she's going to do that. Just in terms of this, now, I said before there were two things that a chairman had to do. Turns out there are other things that I should have done as well, just to show that I'm failing. I was meant to point out a quick note. The views expressed in this debate are those of the individual speakers and do not necessarily reflect the official positions of the organisations they represent. I would go further than that and say, in a debate, generally speaking, the views being expressed are not necessarily even the views of the individual. They've been put on a side. They have to argue this. So who knows what they really think? We'll never find out at lunchtime. Find out. Also, by the way, you can You can, by the way, put questions into the app or Slido. We will be getting some questions with the panel afterwards, so you can chuck them in there now. Please don't make them all about Milo. I know that's what we're thinking about now, but try and keep it based on the energy revolution. All right, we now return to the debate, and for the second affirmative position, please welcome to the stage, or to the debate, Elizabeth Molyneux, the Deputy Secretary for Energy at the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Craig, the best Craig in the room. I'm just going to take off my Victorian government hat, pop it over there, and to Craig's point, I'll take off my Liz Molyneux hat as well. I am having undermined the affirmative team with that. Let's press on. The speed and importance of the energy transition, energy market governance should only be left in the hands of government. I kind of think it's obvious, isn't it? The story of energy transition isn't really around governments versus markets. Markets are a tool. Markets are a tool for optimisation. But the person or the entity who should be setting those rules is clearly government. Government, or governments, in the case of energy, are the architects, the stewards of the system, and the long-term custodians of public interest. Markets have never optimised for public interest. Markets are designed by government originally in 1998. Many of us in the room were around then. And so the market was developed in 1998 by government, and it was designed to optimise the dispatch of energy to make it low cost. It wasn't designed to be a long-term custodian of public interest other than cost and investment. So when we talk about market governance, we're talking about the rules, the frameworks, the protections, the planning that allow innovation and investment and consumer trust to flourish. So it's not just about drafting the rules, but it's about making those public choices. Who does get protected? There will be winners and losers sometimes. Who gets priority? Who gets heard and who doesn't get left behind? As an illustrative point, let's think about the nation-building endeavours, the transitions that we've had in the past that shaped modern Australia. The Snowy Scheme, universal healthcare, major transmission planning, and consumer protections that bite. They weren't market-driven accidents. They were conscious, deliberately designed choices. They were coordinated through government leadership. Government is what drives those frameworks that then the market can flourish within. So industry and innovators, do they matter? Yes, of course they matter. They're the people that deliver the innovative solutions, but governments need to provide the framework. The way I think about this, I don't know if you'll like this, but a government or governments are like gods. And they're like gods who play chess. So they look down from their perch and they look down on the chessboard, which is essentially the market frameworks, and they've designed the chessboard. And then they have pieces that move on the chessboard, the little pawns. And they might be industry, they might be consumers, they might be a sector of the market. And governments provide those rules and the frameworks. All right, that particular chess piece can only move in an L shape. That's all you're allowed to do, networks. Or it might be a pawn, can only move forwards, you can never go backwards. But governments set those rules so the pieces interact to see the whole game played. Annoyingly, sometimes those pieces might move themselves, which is very frustrating from a government's point of view. So I think it's only governments that can really organise that whole view. It's very hard from the chessboard to see everyone else's position and to understand where they need to be. But a government, I almost said God, looking down from the sky has the ability to see all of the more facets. We can't necessarily see the commercial arrangements between the pieces on the chessboard, but we can see the outcome of those arrangements. And if we don't like something, we can change the shape of the chessboard. And that is the role of government. Governments also need to think about that chessboard into... That's God. Yeah. Governments need to think about that chessboard, the shape of the chessboard, intergenerationally. Governments need to make sure that chessboard delivers public benefit. We also need to take a risk lens that perhaps the individual chess pieces won't necessarily take. But from a whole system point of view, what are those risks that government needs to think about, whether they be cyber or climate or consumer protection and societal outcomes? And I think it's only government that can deliver the universal service expectations that are becoming needed in the energy sector. We really need someone to be thinking about how to design the market or how to put rules in place so the market doesn't disadvantage the families, the renters, the small business, the rural communities who might not have the bargaining power or optionality that the profitable people that the market is driving to do. So private can innovate, private can deliver, private capital can be very, very efficient, but it cannot orchestrate my chessboard. Consumers also can't vote in markets the way they can vote in democracies. Yes, they can switch, but I think we all acknowledge now that switching perhaps isn't the measure of success in the energy market. Oh, sorry, Craig. I'll keep going. And then if we think about the transition we are in, we have supercharged this transition and made the need for pace even faster. So whilst Ruchika says governments can't move fast enough, if we let industry move too fast without that central governance, without those rules being put in place, then we do get into a situation perhaps like we have with social media outcomes. We need to make sure that with AI raising the stakes, and that's both in terms of the data that they will have on consumers and who controls that data and knowledge, the biases that may imply in credit and outcomes for consumers, let alone the load growth that we're likely to see and who bears the cost for that across the system. There is definitely a case for government to be the sole entity in the future governance of the energy system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. I'm obsessed by the idea of how government would redesign a chessboard right now. The subcommittees. It'd be fantastic. All right, let's turn to our final speaker, the second speaker of The Negative. Erin Turner is the Chief Executive Officer of Consumer Policy Research Centre to argue against the proposition.
Hi everyone. So 2 very important things you need to know about me right now. First, Team Cat. Second, I'm here to challenge the gods. This debate didn't start how I expected to. My opponent, Adam, has brought something into this discussion that's going to lead me to admit something deep, dark, and shameful to all of you. I worked on the Health Star ratings. Specifically, me and my colleagues are the reason why there's no Health Star rating on that Milo tin. It is a great example for us to kick off with. I was working at Choice during the great Health Star development, and it was meant to be government, industry, and consumer, but actually, really, it was an industry-developed process that failed to realise vested interests need to be called out. It also led to some of the most absurd moments of my career as a consumer advocate. We polled people about how they ate their Milo, and that led to stomping around Canberra, convincing politicians that no, everyone does eat this on ice cream, it actually happens. But beside that, what I took from that unusual moment in my career, no one has it with skim milk, was that you've got to have a process that calls out a vested interest. Of course, companies that make Milo want to be able to give it 5 stars. They might have some great things to say, but you've got to have someone that can call out, no, you're in this and you want this system because it's going to make you money. It's going to make you look great. And that's where I come to in this debate. Governments can't do this alone. It shouldn't just be them. They're getting arguments constantly from industry. They need the community sector and consumers to help back them in. My wonderful colleague here has argued that we can't just have a single instrument, we need a symphony. And what I want to build on there is that we need people who face the greatest risk in the energy transition to be there making the decisions about that transition. And we need Australians with the greatest backbone to oversee that transition. And as much as I admire my colleagues in government, they don't always have the space and the political backing to be as bold as we need them to be in that energy transition. They need some backup. Right now, we have people trying to sell us a future where a data-hungry, resource-hungry, water-hungry technology, that's going to be the solution to our climate crisis. We're hearing that ChatGPT, a technology that's still not sure how many letter R's are in the word strawberry, that's going to be the intelligence that drives this transition. Instead, government needs our most brave, our most future-focused, and our most sceptical Australians to work with them on the energy transition. If I was building a crack team to help the government with this task, here's who I'd recruit. First is a young person who led the school strike for climate. Someone who knows in their bones that if we don't get this right, they're carrying the consequences. They need to be there with government making these decisions because this is really going to affect them. The second person I'd get in, a perimenopausal woman. No one understands the consequences of a sudden warming event more than her. And she is too busy to mess around. And lastly, I would bring in Australia's greatest bullshit detectors. The people who can hear arguments from vested interests and have the experience of calling out gaslighting when they see it. Specifically, we need the girls in the group chat. Channeling that same energy after a messy breakup as someone dared to lie to their friend. Seriously, the energy transition's too important. It affects every single one of us, and all of us need to be there at the table making these decisions with a long-term frame of mind. We all need to play a part in creating a genuine green future. We can't let government do this alone. It's too important. We all need to be there. And specifically, government needs the future-focused perspective of young people, the ruthless efficiency of a middle-aged woman, and the I call bullshit energy from the girls' group chat.
Thank you to our wonderful debaters. Now, before we are going to vote on the winner at the end, but before we get to that, we are going to ask some questions. And basically, anyone from either side we'll get both sides to answer. You can do it depending on who wants to jump on it. Actually, interesting. We'll ask this one first, get it out of the way. It's the most popular question so far. See if you're brave enough to answer this. What's the voluntary health star rating of the energy industry right now? What would you be giving it out of 5? What do you reckon?
Nestle gives it.
Can we have the mics on, please?
Nestle gives it 4.5.
Nestle gives it 4.5, yeah. The industry might give it 5 out of 5, but I wonder whether consumers would necessarily.
Yeah, I think I would choose not to publish the rating in that instance.
Yeah. This particular instance, yeah. Yeah. By the way, I'm currently doing a documentary that involves health star ratings, so I'm shaking down here. Thank you for bringing those in here. Now, a question here. Harriet says, the mess of varying smart meter and EV charger designs in Europe and interoperability issues should be good reminders that coordinated design standards matter. So let's hear from the affirmative first on that particular point, and then one from the negative.
Yes.
And the negative?
We wouldn't have smart meters without innovation.
Yes, okay. To digress, you don't have to, people really don't want to get to the bell, do they, today?
It's a balance of both, right? It can't just be government. It has to be government leveraging, again, the frameworks, but in collaboration with industry and innovation and disruptors. innovation and disruption, I think, is not something that is naturally a part of bureaucracy.
I will counter that with an add to my yes. That sure, we have lots of there's EV. Europe has got lots of different innovation and lots of things happening. And I think that's exactly the point. We saw it in telco with a plethora of plans, and no one can work out what they're on. And we're beginning to see these sorts of things in energy clearly in Europe. So I think this is exactly where government needs to step in, simplify, ask what is needed, and whilst acknowledging this might be the most efficient and optimal way from a market point of view, there is possibly a simpler way, and I don't think simplicity is ever valued in a market.
Yes, wasn't it Europe that also decided to kind of stop the yearly update to your charging mechanism for your phone as well, which thank God for that particular innovation.
So I want to. There's an element in this comment around coordinated design standards matter. Has anyone ever been involved in a standards process here in the room? I'm so sorry for you. I think there's something about, yes, we want people at the table and we want to work this through, but it's how you do that consultation and how you develop the instrument that really matters. Unfortunately, the standards processes I've been part of, you may have a voluntary, unpaid consumer or a community representative at the table. You will have 7 or 8 very well-resourced industry representatives at the table, and you'll have a government bureaucrat who is doing this as one of many projects they're doing and trying to balance all of those voices. They're often a really poorly designed process. We do need standards to get us through this and make everything work, but the current way we do it, it doesn't work. It doesn't lead to that challenging of vested interests that I talked about that actually is really needed. Yes, industry have something to say, but we also need to make sure that that community voice is resourced to talk back. That's really missing.
All right, I'm not sure if that was an argument for the affirmative or the negative, but next question. Rural customers are experiencing more inequality in access to capacity and electrification, not less. What's the role of government and how must it evolve? Let's hear from the affirmative on how the government-only approach will solve it for rural communities. Adam's just trying to think of, how does this relate to Milo?
Government makes choices all the time, and there will be differences across different regions around how energy is experienced. That is the case now. In terms of how can government change that, that's exactly within government's power to do and make those choices to change it. Now, we all know changing it is going to be quite challenging in the energy sector because of the number of rules and regulations, but if government has a will to do so, then that is exactly the role of government, and I fail to see how that particular aspect could be done by any other entity other than government.
And Craig, Milo is more expensive in remote and regional locations than it is in cities. And if you want to make a change and make that more equitable, then ultimately it's going to be government, it's not industry that does that.
Right, yes. Okay, on the negative side?
So government, as part of their existing framework, set up smeared pricing and smeared investment criteria for the state. And so that's one of the reasons why it's difficult to ensure that lower populations in regional and rural areas have the same kind of access to reliability and security of supply that we do in urban centers. What you could do is have regional markets that have more pricing transparency about what would be a successful solution for distributed energy resources and community microgrids in those areas that would more accurately reflect the cost of actually putting those solutions into regional areas where they might not stack up in urban areas. So I think it's actually a case where markets could come in and actually provide some pathways for those regional and rural communities to increase their capacity.
So I feel this question. I live in regional Australia, not rural Australia, Shepparton. I can guarantee you will never have a bigger fight if you tell someone in regional Australia that the government's just going to fix it. Don't worry about it. This is a community you need to bring along with you. Government has to work with them, not just because they should, and this is how this should work ethically and morally, but also because the people who understand what's happening in their communities best are the ones who live there. Recently in my area in regional Victoria, the fires went through. Government has not been the party that's responded first. It has been the Rotary clubs and the community clubs. They're the ones out there helping people who don't have an energy connection, getting them generators, getting them water tanks, getting them back up and running. That is not a government-led initiative. Community know what they're doing in this space. Government can work with them and work effectively, or do something that won't work. That's how I see that choice.
Well, my answer would be, if you want something done in the regions, just make sure Barnaby Joyce makes money out of it. That's how you solve the problem. To the next question, how are we going to combat distrust in government, especially the idea that governments do not act in the public good, which kind of goes to that question there a little bit. Is this, if it is government only, affirmative, who love the government over there, if it is government only, how do you overcome the trust problem? How do you make it, because there's still going to be criticism from outside, from other players, isn't there?
Indeed, indeed. So I think it comes down to who would you trust more? Government might not be trusted. You take away government, you want private entities with profit motives driving that change. They're trusted more than government. Is that what we're saying here? I don't think that's what we're saying. I think that there's a level of institutional trust that has been degraded over the last 10 years in every large institution, whether it be corporates, government, or they're probably the two really, aren't they? So, the religion, that's the other one. So I think that it will come down to a relativity of trust.
Negative side?
Look, I believe government can do great things, and we need it to do great things if we're going to go through something as big as an energy transition. I just don't think they can do it alone. It goes back to that regional-rural discussion we were just having. There is a lot of distrust, and particularly it's caused by example after example where someone from a big city will come out into a region and just tell people, well, this is how it works. They're not listening, they're not engaging, they're not responding to the realities on the ground and what that community needs. The best way through is in that partnership with community, and one that's effective and clear and draws lines and talks about what can and can't be delivered. But if government goes alone, that's going to keep building that distrust problem.
Just further on that, just to the trust question, and it came up earlier, questions about misinformation were brought up as well. I mean, obviously, when you are having this battle and saying we're going to go to the local community and we're going to get the community involved and be involved in it, how does that role of misinformation, for instance, in regional areas and that, how does that play?
Yeah.
Okay, Erin, you seem keen on that one. Go.
Oh gosh, I'm left with that terrible topic. Look, partly here I will come back to there are players in this that have a vested interest in fostering mistrust. We need to be able to identify and call that out, particularly when it's happening online en masse. Myths about solar and wind and others, that's something that's being driven by parties that put some serious money behind it, or systems that don't stop bad actors and bad advertising. I think the right way through is to meet community where they're at and have those honest, clear conversations about trade-offs, and community will work with parties that do that openly and honestly, but it's not easy work. You've got to go spend time and actually talk to people about their lives and concerns. But I think part of the solution is also calling out where particularly the digital world is amplifying some very bad actors.
So does that then mean that government should have stepped into the misinformation world? Does that mean that government should be in there regulating, putting frameworks around what you can and can't publish online? It sounds to me that's what you mean.
Yes, with community.
I thought affirmative's argument was going to be that's the unfortunate influence of fossil fuel actors, which is why government should regulate that, because fossil fuel actors have no influence on government whatsoever. We're going to wrap up. We're going to vote very soon. I'm just going to ask this one. If government's God, who's Judas? No, I don't know. Yeah, government is like God. More like the Greek gods. Everyone's having sex with each other and falling from grace. It's just like that. All right, let's vote on this, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we are going to use our lights in this case. Remember, do not put them towards your face in any way. We bear no responsibility for any blindness that is caused by these products. Somebody said, they did not listen to me. All right, so what we're going to do is you can put your light. What we're going to do is we're going to vote. You're going to hold up the lights. I'm going to say those in favour of the affirmative. You hold up a light if you're in favour of the affirmative. If you favour of the negative, you hold up when I say those in favour of the negative. This is a lot like the applausometer thing, but I guess it means that people with stronger hands and applauses cannot influence the debate. This is a very equal debate. Or does it mean, though, I'll be more influenced by lights towards the front than the back? I don't know. We can't come up with a perfect system here. But anyway, so given the speed and importance of the energy transition, energy market governance should be left only in the hands of the government. Who believes the affirmative one on this one? Hold up your lights.
Yes, come on, one. Oh.
Okay, all right. And who believes the negative one on this one? I think we're going to give it to the negative there, yes. Congratulations. Thank you to all of our debaters today.